Good evening, everyone. I now call to order the Thursday, October 27, 2022 meeting of the City of Sugar Land Planning and Zoning Commission. Welcome, everyone, tonight. Commissioners, welcome to you. We've got a new commissioner, so on behalf of the commission, I'd like to extend our welcome to Commissioner Patel. Thank you very much for joining us and for your service. We look forward to working with you. And thanks to those who are joining us here in the chamber tonight and online. First order of business is public comment. Do we have anyone signed up tonight for public comment to comment on any item that is not on the agenda? All right, then we will move on to item 3A, consideration of and action on the minutes of the September 13, 2022 meeting. You have the commissioners, you have the minutes in your packets. Any changes?
Motion to approve.
I've got a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Landine. Is there a second?
Second.
I've got a second. I think that was by Commissioner Dawood.
Yes.
And any further discussion? All right, please vote at this time. And that passes unanimously among the commissioners that are present. We will move on to item 4A, consideration of and action on a recommendation for the proposed rezoning of 6.241 acres from Telfair West Commercial District General Development Plan to Tarrington Office Park Final Development Plan, which is located along Telfair Avenue, Coatsworth Avenue, and Tarrington Avenue, and adjacent to the existing Sprouts Farmers Market. Brittany, we'll hear your presentation, and then we'll move to the public hearing.
Good evening, Commissioners. So here is the location of the proposed FDP. And see it is off of 59. Here is Tarrington Avenue on the east side, and here this is the existing Sprouts Farmers Market, and to the south is the existing Sterling McCall dealership. So as mentioned, this is a proposed 6.241 acres located on the west side of Tarrington Avenue and south side of Telfair Avenue. This FDP is located within the larger Telfair West Commercial District General Development Plan, and this proposed development calls for several one-story buildings with surface parking. The use list focuses on professional offices with limited services and retail, and ultimately the FDP aligns with the GDP. Here is the site layout plan for the FDP. Here you can see there is access provided off of Tarrington Avenue here, as well as Coatsworth Avenue over here. And then here is the landscape plan on the left. Per our PD requirement, all trees must have a minimum 4-inch caliper compared to the usual 2.5-inch caliper requirement. And then there's landscape setbacks on each side, as well as generous landscape buffering over here facing Telfair Avenue. And then to the right, we have the pedestrian and bicycle plan with proposed pedestrian crosswalks connecting the buildings, as well as the existing sidewalks and a pedestrian plaza that is proposed here, and an existing pedestrian plaza to the north here. And here are the proposed elevations for the building. And please note that these are not to scale and these are a tentative design. As usual, notification was posted in the local newspaper and on the website, and all regulations were followed regarding public notice notification. An online form was made available, and staff received only one informational inquiry about the FDP and is not aware of any opposition. So your initial consideration points. As mentioned before, this FDP is in alignment with the General Land Plan, as well as the General Development Plan and Future Land Use Plan. And this specific use list is tailored uniquely to this development in that it focuses specifically on professional office and medical uses with limited retail and services. As mentioned before, there is a proposed pedestrian plaza on the east side of the development, as well as pedestrian walkways that would connect the proposed buildings and existing sidewalks, and the PD shall be developed in accordance with all the exhibits. Therefore, staff recommends holding a public hearing before conducting consideration and action, and staff recommends a recommendation of approval to the mayor and city council for proposed rezoning to Tarrington Office Park FDP. And the applicant is present for questions. If y'all could please stand up and introduce yourselves.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rodrigo Mendoza.
You come on up and do it from the podium, please, sir. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rodrigo Mendoza. I'm with Mirror Group. We are acting as the architect for the project, and we're here to respond any questions you guys may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And staff is open to any questions the commission may have after the public hearing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brittany. At this time, I'm going to open the public hearing, and we will receive and hear all persons desiring to be heard on the proposed rezoning of 6.241 acres from Telfair West Commercial District General Development Plan to Tarrington Office Park Final Development Plan, which is located along Telfair Avenue, Coatsworth Avenue, and Tarrington Avenue, and adjacent to the existing Sprouts Farmers Market. Do we have anyone that wishes to address the commission on a public hearing on this agenda item? All right, going once, going twice. All right, I will close the public hearing at this time, and we'll move on to consideration and action. Commissioners, any questions for city staff or the applicant? And Commissioner Patel, I'll start with you. All right, Commissioner Dawood.
No questions.
Going once. Okay. All right, Commissioner Smith. All right, go. We have time.
Thank you, Brittany, for the overview. One thing that I just wanted to get clear is that this is all for a one-story development, correct? From the
Yes, ma'am.
proposal? But in the exhibits and in the big building regulations, it mentions two-story as well. So there's just notes in there, so it was just a little confusing. So I don't know whether that just should be taken out of the overview.
This should be intended to be one story.
Okay.
Commissioner
So that's
Smith,
a good point. And we'll note that.
you show us where you.
Yes,
where you
it's
see
under,
that.
if you go to exhibits where it gives you the list of exhibits, it mentions two-story building there. It's page 1 when you get into, after the letter. And then that's at the bottom of the page. And then it's also, if you keep going, it's page 5 under
Okay.
building regulations, 1A and B.
Okay, so make sure it's clear for the record. So it looks like there's references to two-story buildings on the bottom of Exhibit B, on the identification of Exhibits B7 and B8. So the references there to two-story buildings need to be taken out. And I think you also said that on page 5.
Correct.
So page 5 is subsection G, and there are references to two-story buildings in G1A and B that need to be removed as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, thank you. A couple more questions. In Exhibit B3, the list of uses, there is it identifies animal services. And typically when we've had that use in the past, there's a limitation around no runs, no dog runs, and ensuring that if it's a vet's office, that they clean up after themselves. And I didn't see that as a note on those uses.
So if I may, so the question is, one, why is that note not in there? And second, are there any concerns about adding it?
There's no concern adding the note and making those corrections.
Okay. And Brittany, any reason that that's not in there, to your knowledge?
I think the applicant means in that they do not wish to include that specification.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The applicant does not wish to include that specification.
Well, we just heard the applicant say they are.
Oh,
Yeah, excuse the confusion. We
No.
are good with adding the note.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
my question was, since that note's typically in the PD's
Right.
TDC, why
Why
was it
wasn't it
not
in
in there? And maybe there's not an answer to that, so if you don't know, that's fine, but we're all hearing the applicant say they're willing to do that. So do we have some I don't know what the standard language for that would be to
I didn't
recommend
go,
an amendment.
yeah, I know that there's just, if you go back to the development that we had over in Imperial, I
Yeah.
remember we made those notes.
Yeah, for sure. If I could. So we'll go back and work with the applicant and figure out if, what they want to do, what their plan is, if they even think potentially they're going to have one of those. If not, then we'll remove that from the list. So we'll either work with the applicant and add the note, however we deem appropriate, to whether it be no dog runs or limited dog runs or, what you were mentioning,
So
or
either,
just,
so either to eliminate
or just
that
remove it completely,
as a
correct?
service, or to adjust it. as
And we'll
per
go back
regulation.
and talk with the applicant on that and see what their
All right, I
thought, yeah.
appreciate that.
Okay.
I mean, and I do appreciate that. The difficulty for us sometimes is
Sure.
it raises the question of, okay, what are we voting on?
Sure.
And
Well, your motion
gonna-
would be to, if you
to do
decide,
something.
to approve with the condition that staff either adds the note or removes the use.
Right, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, we
Sure,
don't,
sure.
we would never see it again to know what was
Right.
done.
You,
I'm just making.
I
a point.
follow what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Smith, if I interrupted, I apologize. Go
No,
right ahead.
no, it's perfectly fine. The other question I had, if I look at the drawing, is it that there's only going to be one dumpster for all of those buildings?
That's correct. There's only going to be one dumpster enclosure location, but we're going to provide 2 dumpsters for the entire development.
So if I recall correctly, people like at one end are going to have to haul their trash all the way down to
Yes,
the dumpster?
the trash will be valet service. So there will be a service that will come and pick the trash of each one of the buildings.
So that doesn't mean the trash is going to be sitting out in front of the buildings and, correct?
That's correct. The trash will not sit outside of the buildings.
So there'll be some place then for their trash outside if a service is going to come pick it up from the rear of the building?
No, this will be a schedule. The trash shelves will have access to the units.
So they'll keep the trash in the building?
That's correct.
Okay. Does a schedule need to be set? I mean, how often, for that many buildings, I can imagine that it, particularly if a restaurant goes in, there's going to be quite a bit of trash.
There's no restaurant use schedule.
But there's one allowed, so one
Yeah.
could come in. Maybe it's not planned for currently. Thought I saw a restaurant, maybe I
Yeah,
missed
No,
it.
it's on there. It's on there.
Yeah, no drive-through.
Yeah, it's not for, so far now, it's not projected to be a restaurant in there. But to your question of how the service will be scheduled, that's something will need to be studied, how this service will be specific on the time and schedules once the offices are on operations.
Okay. Because I think right now, maybe the city would only pick it up twice, but that may fill up 2 dumpsters very quickly if a business such as that would move in, which would be allowed as a part of the plan. So I understand it's not planned for currently, but once this get approved, then a restaurant could move in sometime in the future.
If that is a concern, we as well have no problem removing that restaurant's use.
I don't know if that's what you would want to do. I'm just identifying that might be that's just a concern of mine around just only having 1 dumpster for that many buildings.
Yes, and just as I was referring, we have 1 location, but we have 2 full-size dumpsters, or the room enough for excuse me, I don't remember the volume, but the large size of the dumpsters.
Okay. And then the other question I had, I went and drove around the lot, and on the Telfair side, there's already, it looks like a man-made burr or a hill that's along that roadway. Is that planned to stay in place with that landscaping, or is that going to be taken out then with this buildings coming in?
That is planned to stay.
Okay.
But once we develop further the project and define grading, the final decision will be taken. But that's planned to stay.
Because it already has the landscape. I mean, there's like a lot of really nice sized trees.
Yes,
along
it's
that road.
it has already existing trees based on the requirements that it will actually screen partially from the street. So our intent is to keep that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Preet?
Yeah, just a couple of small things. It's in here somewhere, I'm sure, but is there anything about lighting and what kind of lighting structures are going to be in place around the perimeter of the building? Is that am I missing it in the landscape regulations? I was just curious as far as what that was going to look like.
No, there's no photometric study done yet.
Okay, that's going to happen though at some point.
Yes,
Okay.
that will happen once the site layout is finalized and the location of all the lighting is established.
And then the other thing that I had was around the traffic impact. Given that this is behind a busy shopping center, is that considered or something that we're considering to look at to see that there's multiple entry points into the building area or into the actual development? So was there any impact analysis done on traffic to see if this area would add any more congestion?
Yes, sir. A TIA was done and concurred with regarding this FDP, and traffic ultimately determined that there's no concerns regarding any potential like heavy traffic here, given that this is not heavy intense uses. This is mostly meant for office uses.
Okay. Cool. That's all I had, Chairman.
Commissioner Landine?
Yeah, a few questions, Brittany. So let me start with a couple of smaller things. One, when you reference canopy in the case analysis, that just means the part that extends out over the entrance of the east
Yes, sir.
building. Okay. So if you look at the landscape plan, so it looks like exhibit B6. Nope, that's circulation. Wherever it is, they're about the same on all of them. So
It's
B4. So I guess my question is on the pedestrian, like these pedestrian plazas that at least one of them on this southeastern side is called out. And then in the notes it says pedestrian connectivity to the adjacent retail and restaurant development. It doesn't actually look like it connects to anything on the other side of the street. Is that just a rendering, or is that actually it's just kind of it just goes to nowhere?
No, sir, you are correct.
Okay. So what's the thinking on the connectivity to the Sprouts area?
I believe the thinking there is that, as you can see, or are you speaking regarding pedestrian connectivity specifically?
I could help. I think when I went and drove it, you're right, it's not a connector, but it's like if you cross the street, you're at that Mexican food restaurant. Where they said the corner where that little park's supposed to be. Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah, I
ma'am.
mean,
La Tapatía.
The question becomes, there's no sidewalk on the other side. Is there?
yeah, there is.
Is it just not, cool. If there's sidewalk over there, great. Like I said, it could have been just a issue with the rendering itself. Secondary point there is it looks like there's, at least in the depiction on the north point of the landscape plan, it shows what appears to be another pedestrian plaza. Is that so? There's actually two.
Yes, sir. So that is an existing pedestrian plaza.
Oh, okay.
However, that per the FDP and GDP requirements, there must be at least one pedestrian plaza provided for specifically for this development. And so that is why there is only one pedestrian plaza called out on the east side, because that is proposed and not existing.
Understood. And do we know, I'm going to assume the answer is probably not, but that plaza that's on the north point there, I mean, I guess there's nothing there, so it's probably not getting used right now. Is that fair assumption to make?
Yes, sir.
And so I guess my question becomes, is the implementation of this southeastern plaza, is that because I appreciate the applicant wanting to put in a pedestrian plaza. So I think that's great, right? But my question becomes, is that the highest and best placement of that particular plaza? And you know, right on the street, on the other side of the parking lot screen, you know, it's right and you know, there's no separation between traffic and so I guess, I mean, I'm not gonna get overly prescriptive on how that actually gets implemented, but I guess my point would be that I would encourage the applicant to consider a placement that's going to actually make it an attractive place for a pedestrian to sit and be on a plaza. So again, like I'm not prepared to prescribe where that goes, but that would be my strong preference to kind of reconsider and be more thoughtful about where that goes. The next question I had was on, we can stay on that same rendering. If you look on the, so you got I'm not going to describe this the right way. Brittany, would you mind putting up one of the exhibits?
There's no keyboard here.
Who's running the slides?
Which exhibit would you like up?
Yeah, I mean, any of them, B4 is fine. So if you look on, you've got the 5 buildings on the west side, right? And then you go to the building that is all by itself on the northern side, and you have this inlet here that appears to be like parking. It's shaded slightly lighter, so I'm assuming that is also parking. Is that? So are there multiple spots there? Like what's going on? I can't quite tell from the depiction.
You're correct. The intent of that area, it's parking.
Those are just parking spots?
Yes, just
Okay.
parking spots that most likely will serve the building or right behind it, but as well the ones that are across the street.
The ones in front. Got it. And same would be true on the little inlet. Yeah, it's shaded the same way. So, okay, I'm good there. I just want to be sure I understood. It looked like you were like backing in, you know, big trucks or something. So shifting to the usage, I noticed that, so on the approved uses, let's see here. So Exhibit B3, Brittany, can you help me understand why there's maximum square footage articulated on 3 of them and not all of them?
Yes, sir. I believe the reasoning why those specific uses have square footage limitations is because, for instance, especially for restaurants, those can be more heavy uses. And so this FDP is intended to be mostly office space with limited retail and such. So that is why there was a cap placed on that specific use than the other ones.
So presumably a salon could go and take an entire building.
Yes, sir.
So I'm actually coming at this from the other direction, which is when you put a max on the square footage of things that are, I'll just say interesting, whether it's an eating place, whether it's this studio here, metalwork, woodwork, not sure exactly what all that is. I guess I'd like to be more permissive in this than less, so that if somebody, I recognize the applicant probably has a lot of experience in these types of developments and knows precisely what's going to, what these spaces would attract, but when we think about this over a 10 or 15 year horizon, I think it's our role to try to make sure that the PD reflects usages that could that could be attractive for this particular place as market changes and applicants have moved along from the development itself. So I would suggest that we just remove square footages unless that becomes a huge issue. And you can talk me out of it if that's if removing square foot maximums causes problems.
We can definitely staff can work with the applicant regarding reevaluating the square footages and whether those are necessary to place such limitations on those specific uses. And I also wanted to say, Commissioner Taylor, regarding your earlier point about the pedestrian plaza, staff can work with the applicant on determining what is the best placement of a pedestrian plaza and what placement would actually encourage pedestrians to use it and be a viable place for people to relax and
Yeah,
be a
no,
safe
I
spot.
appreciate that. And I think that, we sat through the pedestrian, I can't remember the formal name, but the master plan. Mobility, thank you. And I think this is, the pedestrians are part of that. So I think whenever we make a motion, I'd like to include removal of the maximum square footage from the our square foot limits on the buildings. So we'll see how that goes. And then I think the last piece that I wanted to cover was in your presentation, Brittany. You said that that the renderings, and I'm guessing you were referring to B7, were tentative design. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So, but it's included in the PD that we're being asked to approve tonight. So, so how do we square those two things? Hi, Lauren.
So, conceptual is a word we use. And I think that's probably what you were seeing in those other, what is it, B7 or 8? B8. I mean, I think the question would be what would change? That's probably what I would have the applicant kind of explain to you all, is what they mean by that and what could potentially change. We have the building regulations in the PD in terms of height and materials. So it can't deviate from that, but I'm gonna ask him to kind of walk you all.
Well,
through, like-
while you're there, I
Yeah,
don't,
sure.
I mean, exhibits like B8 and, they're like the fancy renderings.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't give me any level of real detail. So like, I'm less concerned about those.
Right.
But then you go to B7 and you've got, I mean, top plate heights and
Yeah.
canopy bottoms and all of these kinds of things that,
Yeah.
that if they're tentative, that's fine, but I don't think they should be included in what we're being asked to approve.
Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of detail on there. Things do, adjust in the field in terms of the top of what you were mentioning, the top of height, and let me let him speak to it, see what his, and I'll come back.
So just to clarify, we included this for additional representation of what we're intending to include. From our end, these are final designs. But we are presenting as tentative just to have room for, as you mentioned, there's a lot of details like top plates and parapet heights and such on these elevations. This may change just in case there need to be adjustments regarding pricing once the development is moving forward. So for us, these are final. Yeah.
So Lauren, how does thank you for that. I appreciate that. How does the city deal with that? I mean, what happens if it's not a question really about materials or that
Yeah.
kind of thing, but like fundamental altering of what's presented here in terms of height and width and depth and that kind of thing. We've got canopies called out here. We've got all kinds of those details, and I recognize costs can shift around and materials can change and all that, but so I'm less concerned about like those types of details than height and the like. And I guess so in the course of design and implementation, how does the city deal with a deviation
Adjustments.
from the
modifications. Yeah. The code does allow for minor deviations for PDs.
What is minor?
So yeah, it does specify, you made me so side code. I think it's the greater of 10% or 2,500
So it's
square feet.
articulated in the development
Yes,
code.
it's specific, but it only gets you so far, and we have run into that and dealt with that with other PDs throughout the city.
And what
where
happens?
the applicant has to make a choice. They can either deviate by what is our allowable limit in the code, or they can come back forward through the process and make changes. I mean, that is part of the PD. However, if the commission would rather not include this specific of detail on elevations and rely on more or less what's written in Exhibit B, we can go that route as well. We have done both.
Written in Exhibit B.
Over the years.
Help
Yes.
me there.
The development regulations, so page 2 and primary, page 2 and 5 is where the building regulations are. 2 and 5.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: I see your point there. I mean, based on the words inside of the PD,
Mhm.
they cannot build a 41-foot tall
Right.
building.
Right, yes,
So we're covered there.
yes.
Would staff have an issue with Exhibit B7 not being included in the PD?
No?
So
You know, I
then
mean-
what if anything at that point would prevent them from building a 40-foot tall box with no canopies, no?
Yeah, I mean, we still have the layout plan that
Mhm.
does dictate, I mean, this is specific.
That's
So
my
while
that's
it
my
doesn't
last
have,
question.
okay, while it doesn't have sizes, you know, there's other things on site limitations that would also preclude somebody from being able to do a bunch of 40,000 square foot boxes, parking being one of them, setbacks and other requirements.
Well, so now I'm talking about the finishes, right?
Okay.
So, because that's my question, is that this, like B7 shows, oh, this is going to be nice, right? That you've got these canopies, you got the breakup, and I believe that somewhere, although I don't think it's in the actual PD, maybe it's in the case notes, case analysis.
There's some articulation where it talks about some of that, if that's what you're, you know,
It
so you
says
don't just
something
have the flat
about
wall.
canopy shall be provided, intended pedestrians face public. I'm on the case analysis now.
Oh, okay.
At all building entrances intended for pedestrians, there is a facade. Oh, here we go. Facades of the building shall be of similar architecture design, materials, That at the top of that, well, there's no page numbers here, but I'm at the top. I'm on the case analysis, and that paragraph at the top of the next page of the analysis talks about facades and finishes and however, that is not included in the PD itself.
Yeah, so that's the building facade finishes on page 5. So Brittany's report was just kind of doing a summary of
Yep.
the actual building finish regulations in terms of material. And so we do, you know, when we review site plan packages for districts that require a facade percentage, I mean, that has to be shown in a table on the elevations in the site plan package. So
Yeah.
this is what we would use.
This would be
I'm sorry.
being to
The exhibit
G2,
B. Mhm,
G2.
yeah. Yes.
Is that?
Would-
Are we on the same page?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
so
G2. Yes.
yeah. So then, if you look at B7, in many respects, it becomes extraneous, right? I mean, it's there for us for obvious reasons to help us understand what it's going to look like and all that. But in terms of inclusion in the PD, to me, it doesn't make sense to have something tentative included in the final development plan. Or that's not the final PD that we're approving.
Fair enough.
So I guess we can deal with that in a motion if we wanted to.
Well, I mean, we can have discussion between any other of the commissioners if anyone wants to weigh in or. You
Well,
know,
let me
just-
ask
I mean,
this while I'm on my soapbox here. Y'all will recall what was the development right in front of Murphy's where there were like 7 different options that
across from Nowco Champion X.
no
No.
down. I'm sorry, Murphy's Deli. No, McAllister's.
Oh,
Murphy's,
McAllister's.
my fault.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
University Commons.
Yeah,
Phase 3.
down
Mhm.
right south.
Yes.
In this case, we're being asked this evening to approve the arrangement of the buildings as described in this, in all of these exhibits. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And PD applications, as y'all know, can look different. There's no prescribed way an applicant, a private developer designs what they want to design, how they pay and design what they want to design. So that's why, and we've had these conversations before, why you guys don't see the same thing over and over again, because it's going to depend on what level of detail the applicant provides on some of that. So that one was, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to.
But that one had the options. Remember that discussion was about
Yeah.
the scenario options.
So, you've got basically exhibit B that shows landscape and all the, actually it's not landscape. Exhibit B2 that shows the arrangement of the buildings. And that's final, that's not tentative, is that correct?
That is what they have shown us, so that is what we reviewed. Yeah. Yep. That's what I mean by this is what any private developer comes forward and says, this is what I want to develop. And so we as staff review, and then commission and council review, is this what is in alignment to be developed? Is this what's appropriate to be developed? That's the
Sure.
discussion.
So my question, what happens if when they get to the construction phase that the single building on the north side, they want to drop down to the south side, for example?
That would totally change the entire layout. This is very specific in terms of the internal access drives and the parking
Right.
areas. So that is an understanding that they would have to come back. That's not a deviation.
But what you just said was, it was like, oh, that's kind of what they're planning on doing. But stop short of being like, that is the arrangement of the buildings that are going to be approved by the commission and council.
Right. Unless you all have, because the example you have on the University Commons was because there were scenario plans, which we have
Sure.
done on several other
Yeah, yeah.
PDs. That gives an applicant an option to say, well, could be this, or maybe one or two other things, and it's up to the commission and council to determine if they're all appropriate. In this case, there's one, so this is it.
Yeah.
So they'll either develop to this, or they'll have to come back through the process.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Okay, hold on. Commissioner DeWood has a question, and I'll
Yeah.
come back to you. Commissioner
I
Smith.
just had a quick question. Can you put up that exhibit again, where the landscaping plan is?
Okay. This one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there any requirement for parking lot trees?
There are, if they're islands, it's kind of specific on islands. So you can, the code, two answers to that, actually. One is the code the standard code can allow for some trees to count if they're adjacent to the parking lot areas. Second would be, PDs do allow deviations to ask for different things from the standard code. So in this case, there's no parking lot islands. However, this kind of goes back to the discussion on the pedestrian plaza. If you all feel it's appropriate to add more in here or some other areas, that's within the commission's purview to make that part of the motion.
So,
And we can have a discussion on it.
is that something we want? Do we want some internal landscaping, some parking lot trees?
There's not a ton of room. I would think here, in the middle here. I don't think this probably, in terms of canopy and root growth might not be.
No, I meant
but
like any islands at the corners where I don't see someone being able to park at the corners where
Like here?
when you turn a corner, those are, you can't park in those corners, right? So those are going to either being hardscape or they can be greenscapes. And, having islands help. But of course, you're going to take away from the parking count.
And that would be, yes.
So, but I do think the corners as you turn, whether you turn left or right, those corners cannot be used for parking.
And are you down here
No,
No.
internally, when you,
internally?
yeah,
Here? I'm
sure.
trying-
Like
okay.
this one is
Mhm.
green. Now,
Mhm.
if you follow your cursor up along the,
Mhm.
if you follow, go west, just go west. Yeah,
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
If you come back a little tad bit, I mean, those are the corners where I don't foresee someone being able to park. If you come back to a corner of a building,
Down here. Corner of the building.
Lauren, if you just,
Corner of the building.
yeah, somewhere like this,
Okay,
right?
yeah, that's what I meant, down here, yeah, uh-huh.
Yeah, there.
Mm-hmm,
I don't have your cursor,
I know,
but that's the,
yeah,
you know, I think those are good
down here.
spots for adding some trees.
Go ahead.
Right.
Yes, please.
Yes, to your comment, Commissioner Dawood, we have a more developed parking layout where we include parking islands where there's going to be tree and landscape as well as planting beds.
Okay.
We were just not showing that detail in these exhibits, but we're accounting for providing those.
I see. Thank you.
So, I'm gonna interrupt. So there's additional detail on the parking that's being proposed for this to be implemented, and we're not getting a look at it?
There is, we have developed a more detailed parking layout.
Why don't we have that? I hear you. Okay. Not intended to be an unfair question, but it is a fair question. Maybe not of you. Okay. Let's keep it moving. Commissioner Smith, I've got a few questions
Okay,
myself, but
just
you go right ahead.
Really one. So it's really for clarity along what Commissioner Landine was asking. So if this is the final plan, then who oversees? I didn't ask this question around where the bicycle racks are going to go and where the utility boxes are going to go, because that's something that it indicated that would be sort of done, later. So shouldn't that be a part of this plan then as well?
We can have them show, the bicycle parking. Utility boxes, not so much. It typically happens during, later on in construction, but that's why we write in, if they have a transformer box, there has to be screening around it, which we've run into. So, is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, it just seemed like the buildings were very close together, so I was trying to imagine where those utility boxes were going to go, where they couldn't be in clear vision sight or from the sidewalks or the pedestrian paths.
Mm-hmm. Y'all have any idea? Have you more detailed plan on that?
We do have, or the FDP has landscaping screening for any of those.
Okay.
And we are expecting to have those in the back of the buildings and screened with landscaping.
All right. Finished.
Okay. I have a couple questions, and then I'll give you I'll be happy to share my thoughts. The first question is, do we not get these on and I know we've got a lot of people up here to answer questions, but this one I think is for city staff. Do we not get these things for review and discussion before we get them for consideration and action?
So, this is an option. You don't have to make a recommendation this evening. If the commission feels like they want to just do discussion and direction, we'll come back later for consideration and action. We've been putting it on the agenda to just allow more flexibility in our agenda process. If we moved a case forward and the commission felt like there wasn't anything they needed, then there really isn't a need to come back for a second meeting, so you could take action that evening.
Sure. I get that.
Alternatively, if there are a lot of things, you can make the decision to.
Sure. I guess my point on with that would be that, we're starting to see things that folks have questions about. And the kinds of things that are being talked about tonight, in my mind, would be great to discuss first before we talk about putting something to a vote, and particularly having to amend it on the fly,
That's fine.
adjustment to
That's totally
exhibits
fine, within your
and things
purview.
like
If
that?
we don't now put it on the agenda, though, you can't do it. And so it's just there for an option for the commission.
Okay, so
Yeah.
anytime there's an option that says consideration and action,
Mm-hmm.
we always have the option of not doing that.
Correct.
Okay, understood. Second of all, what is or was the Telfair West Commercial District General Development Plan?
It's a multifaceted question. It's, you mean,
Like, what is
Like,
it now? Well, it's just,
what do you
what
mean?
is it now?
what is it now? The
Yeah.
remaining acreage from that is what is directly on the other side of Coatesworth,
Okay, but there,
east of Acura,
but
of
there
the
was some
Acura dealership.
general development plan that's
For
been
this,
approved
for
and
this
it's in that
larger area that included the Acura dealership and the Sprouts development.
Okay,
Yes.
and like, am I hearing correctly that it sounds like the applicant is intending that most of these buildings are going to be used for medical office type space? Did I hear that?
Professional services.
Professional services, okay. And I guess my question is, I'm going to ask a question. I think I know what the answer is, but my question is going to be why? Like, is there a demand for that? Is there public interest in doing that? I understand. I think I know what you would say to that, so I'll just ask the question broadly and let you address it.
Yes, that's correct. As my understanding, the public has interest in this specific use and typology, so that's why we are proposing
Okay.
this use.
And I assume also you think you can profitably develop it. That's probably a fair consideration too, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So on the, and this is for staff, in the staff report, in the case analysis, you say the public hearing notice included a link to an online form that can be submitted to provide comments in advance of the meeting. At the time of the writing of this report, staff has not received any inquiries and is not aware of any opposition to plan development. In the presentation, it sounded like you got one inquiry. So what was that inquiry and what was the response?
Yes, sir. So basically, during the time of writing the staff report, I had not received any inquiries. But before making the presentation, I had received a phone call from a resident near this proposed development that was just wondering what it was because she had received one of the letters.
Okay. And did you personally respond to that? And if so, did you provide just a verbal response? Did you give them any written information, or what was that conversation like?
Yes, sir. So it was all through phone calls. So I verbally told them and explained to them that it was for a proposed final development plan. I told them that it was focused on professional uses with limited services and retail, and explained that there was the P&Z meeting if they wished to attend. And that was basically what they just wanted to know.
Okay. Thank you. On Exhibit B3, no, that's not right. B5. Exhibit B5 is titled Plant List for Imperial Highway 6 District Tract I. Why is that? Why does it have that title?
That was an oversight, sir, and we'll be sure to correct that.
Okay, so that should be the Tarrington Office Park,
Yes,
just like
sir.
the other exhibits. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay, well, listen, my comment on the proposal is this. I think we've seen a lot of good things in there. You know, it seems like it's an appropriate development for that property. However, that having been said, it seems like there are some questions about things that might be tweaked a little bit or reconsidered or modified. Personally, I'm only speaking for myself, which I only speak for myself. I'm a little uncomfortable making revisions on the fly, particularly to things like the square footage requirements, because there's also a maximum square footage requirement to the whole development, and I don't want to say we just are going to take that out because and also personally on the exhibits, I don't like the idea of taking exhibits out just because I think even though they're not necessarily to scale and they're not necessarily binding, they help us to appreciate the context of everything that's being presented. And I think if you take it out, then you're even giving maybe a little bit more freedom. And perhaps that's the intent. I worry about the law of unintended consequences when we tinker with stuff on the fly. So that's kind of where I am on this. I feel like it's a good development. It's appropriate to the area. I just think it needs a little bit refinement before we move it to consideration and action. And that's just my view. Sure.
Services portion where it's talking about metalwork, woodwork, furniture, ceramics. I've just never seen that like in a professional building. How would that work? Like there's always a back entrance door in those type of places.
We're accommodating for the use, but the specific of how the logistics of the person who will be using it as that, we don't have detail. So we're accommodating for the use, but we don't have no further detail.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right. I'm going to make a motion to table a recommendation for the proposed rezoning of 6.241 acres from Telfair West Commercial District General Development Plan to Tarrington Office Park Final Development Plan located along Telfair Avenue, Coatsworth Avenue, and Tarrington Avenue, and adjacent to the existing Sprouts Farmers Market for the reasons we discussed.
Let me ask Trish, are we tabling or would we just hold the discussion and then we get direction from the commission and then we'll come back for consideration and action? I don't want to formally table that. That has a different connotation. Yeah.
We have to figure out when we're going to return.
Yeah.
To another
Okay, so what's the before I make the motion
Sure.
and it gets a second, what's your recommendation?
Oh, what do you,
Are you ready to move this forward, or do you want to bring it back?
I
It
think
needs
there's
to
probably,
come- It needs to come back.
Yeah.
So bring it back.
so it's not, so
Okay.
there's no
So
record.
do I need to make a motion
No.
to do that, or we just, I'm
No.
asking the city attorney.
So-
Do I need to make a motion to do that, or we just don't present it for consideration?
We're not going to present for consideration.
Okay, then to the extent I made a motion, I will withdraw it. And we'll conclude our discussion
Right.
on this point. And
And so we would just ask for, let's do like a summary wrap up of
100%.
yeah.
And I would personally, I would view this discussion as kind of the review and discussion part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think many would be prepared to look at this on consideration and action when it comes back with some of these refinements. I don't, just from my own view, I'm not hearing any real opposition to this. I just think there are some things that need to be ironed out. So
Absolutely.
we will not consider it, and I'll withdraw the motion. Thank you very much. And thank you to the applicant for being here and answering questions. We will move on to item 5A. Nope.
Do we need to do a summary of, she was asking for a summary.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So we'll just, let's
You want us?
make
All right.
sure we have everything. Yeah, with consensus on,
So, yeah, so just, and I'll
Yeah.
ask
we're going to revise some labels on the exhibits.
to remove the references
Uh-huh.
to 2 stories.
Right. Take a look at the use list,
And the
remove
pet
the
issue.
maximums.
The pet issue,
Okay.
either
on the-
removing that or
on the use
having the
list, though,
appropriate
do we have
language in there.
Do we have consensus on removing the maximums? And no, we don't.
I just find it unusual that it's articulated for some uses and not for others.
Mhm.
So, and I do think that, again, just my view that, that if some, down the road, I know the intent this time around is purely professional service. But my view is that that the PD as drafted should provide flexibility for future development, and not be constrained by square footages on particular uses when there's not consistent maximums articulated throughout. So.
Okay.
And if I may just add to that, from my view of that, I share that. My view is if you're going to put not you personally, but if we're going to see a square foot limitation on a particular use, that we understand why that's there. Like, does that come from somewhere?
Sure.
Is it the applicant that's wanting to limit that for some reason? Because it'd be helpful to know why certain uses have those certain limitations. I think that would help us to view whether or not they need to be in there or not.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So there's that. There was
The pedestrians. So
the pedestrian plaza comments from Commissioner Landine. There was the correction to the title of Exhibit B5.
and I want to capture something Commissioner Smith mentioned, which is not shown on the landscape plan is any sort of screening around air conditioning units, utility things. In addition, the dumpster enclosure as well. It's not clear to me that that goes around the backside of that. So it would be. So yeah, I think all of that, especially given that each one of these buildings is going to have pad sites for the AC units and utility boxes, that should be included.
Okay. And I'm gonna have to go back. I'm sorry. I know she went through this. What is our consensus on having this?
My view is it should not be considered. Anything that we're approving should not be tentative.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And also, I'll add, I think if there is a more detailed parking layout plan,
Okay.
we'd like to see that.
Trees.
Parking lot trees. Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Parking lot trees.
Hey, and yeah, I'll grab that if you don't mind. If the applicant has, this is not a deal breaker for me, but if the applicant has done photometric analysis or anything of that nature, let's see that. There's no harm in including it. I'm not prepared to make that a condition of approval to see a photometric plan, but that's my opinion.
I believe Commissioner Smith also mentioned calling out the bicycle parking.
Get everything?
Anything else on this item?
They grabbed it.
Yeah,
Okay.
if there's going to be a back egress, then there's, like Commissioner Patel mentioned, then there should be a pathway also.
That's a good point, actually.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you to the applicant. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank
And
you.
unless someone pulls me down, I'm going to go to 5A, Planning and Zoning Commission Liaison Report. So there's one September and 3 October meetings. Who had any of those that, recognizing we may have commissioners that are not here that had those reports. Is anyone here slated to report on any of those meetings?
I attended October 4th and October 18th.
Okay. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right. So October 4th, there was a recognition for the Fire Prevention Week, and it was also a national night out. We had about 37 contracts for various services that were presented to the city, and it was approved in one motion. There was a resolution 22-43, which was passed, and it had to do with acceptance of State of Texas fiscal year 2023 selective traffic enforcement program. Donation for Cullinan Park was accepted in the amount of $1.2 million and some change. And a contract to Millis Development and Construction LLC was awarded for that development or improvement. There was an interesting interlocal agreement that came about between Fort Bend Independent School District and City of Sugar Land with James Reese Career and Technical Center. James Reese Career and Technical Center will provide non-emergency maintenance will provide maintenance and service for non-emergency response vehicles. I thought that was very interesting. And then there was an approval for Resolution 2246 to issue certificates of obligation. This was all for October 4th meeting. October 18th, about 14 contracts were on the agenda. All were approved. One was discussed at length. That had to do with Tyler Technologies Incorporation. City deemed that it was salvageable and they didn't want to abandon their relationship with Tyler Technologies, so it was approved too eventually. Resolution 2248 had to do with one of the districts that we had viewed as commission. That was tabled for a future consideration. There was some opposition to it from public.
Which one was that?
Remember we had discussed where there was a J track and a H track with a detention pond in one of the tracks, and yeah, yeah. No,
By the
I don't know
ballpark.
about the Live Oak Trail, but there was a J and a H track. Lisa can.
This is for the Highway 6 district properties in Imperial.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Lisa, what was the reason it was tabled?
They requested that staff work with the developer on some of the uses that were being requested to be added to that district. If you recall, there were some retail uses that were being requested to be added.
And they also said that maybe they should consider either increasing the radius, because I think there were only 50 households that were in that radius that where it was distributed, and it didn't necessarily represent it.
I don't recall anything about increasing, but it was more about how to include the rest of
How
the
to
community
include more.
beyond the public hearing notice.
Yeah, okay. Exactly what she said. How to include or have more participation. And then there was a contract for $235,000 to CBRE and $285,000 to Epstein Uhun Architects to study how to integrate facilities, master plan, and workspace design, which was an interesting one. So the city's going to spend about $500,000 to see how their facilities can have more public integration. Inframark LLC contract was renewed for water and wastewater services to city. Resolution 2244 was adopted, has to do with Texas legislation session 88. And resolution 2247 was adopted with intent to finance expenditure. I think that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any other reports, liaison reports from anyone here? Okay. Item 5B, city staff reports.
Okay, so the next 2 months, one meeting, because we're in November and December, so we'll only have the one meeting for both of those months. So November 8th, December 13th. The 8th right now, we don't have any zoning items or plats teed up, so we are targeting the annual orientation for that evening. So we will start communicating with you guys about start times for that and different things around that agenda. And then we'll see December 13th, we could see this item come back for consideration and action, and we may have a couple other things too. So that's what we have.
Thank you. And before I ask for a motion to adjourn, I'll just say on a personal level, it's been very interesting and somewhat sad to read about the situation that's going on with Petopia, with our animal shelter. So I want to thank everyone that's working really hard to make the best of a bad situation. I want to also thank some of the surrounding agencies that have helped with the situation of the shelter, and I would just encourage everyone to do what they can to support the situation there so that we can take care of the animals and get back to normal operations. So,
Motion to adjourn.
I've got a motion to adjourn. I will second it. All in favor? That passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We actually did a vote. It
Yeah, I
actually
know.
came up for a vote.